The fluorescent lights in the downtown Seattle office building hummed with that particular frequency that made everything feel slightly unreal, slightly wrong. It was the kind of sound that people stopped noticing after working in corporate environments for long enough, and the kind of sound that became the soundtrack to thousands of forgettable moments. But on that Tuesday morning in March 2021, in a sleek conference room on the 42nd floor of the Pinnacle Tower, those lights would bear witness to something that nobody could ever forget. Rebecca Thornton sat behind the polished mahogany table, her fingers drumming an unconscious rhythm against the leather portfolio in front of her. At 53 years old, she had conducted thousands of interviews during her 2 decades as CEO of Meridian Tech Solutions. She had seen nervous college graduates, overconfident MBA holders, desperate mid-career professionals trying to claw their way back from layoffs. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to read people within the first 30 seconds of meeting them. But nothing in her extensive experience had prepared her for what was about to walk through that door. The Seattle skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, steel and glass monuments reaching toward clouds that threatened rain but never quite delivered. The city had changed so much since Rebecca had built her company from nothing in the late 1990s. Back then, tech was still finding its footing in the Pacific Northwest, but still fighting to prove it belonged alongside the timber and fishing industries that had defined the region for generations. Now, tech was everything. The old Seattle was barely visible beneath the new one, like a palimpsest where the original text kept bleeding through. Rebecca's assistant, Marcus Huang, poked his head through the doorway. His expression was the careful neutral that he always wore when he thought Rebecca might not like what he was about to say. "She's here," Marcus said simply. "The 10 o'clock. Hannah Weaver." "There." Rebecca nodded, straightening in her chair. The position was senior level, director of cybersecurity operations, and the candidate's resume had been impressive enough to warrant her personal attention. 7 years at a competing firm, multiple certifications, a master's degree from Stanford, glowing recommendations. On paper, Hannah Weaver looked perfect. Rebecca made a mental note to wrap this up quickly so she could get back to the quarterly projections that were making her CFO sweat. "Send her in," Rebecca said. The woman who entered was probably in her late 20s, though something about her made it difficult to pin down her exact age. She wore a navy suit that was professional without being stuffy, and her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a way that suggested she cared about looking put together but didn't overthink it. She moved with confidence, her handshake firm, her smile genuine but not overeager, and everything about her screamed competent professional. But it was her eyes that made Rebecca's world tilt sideways. They were an unusual shade of green, flecked with gold near the pupils, the kind of distinctive eyes that painters tried and failed to capture accurately. They were eyes Rebecca had seen before, eyes she had spent years trying to forget, eyes that had stared out from missing person posters plastered across every telephone pole, storefront window and community bulletin board in suburban Portland, Oregon. During the scorching summer of 1998, Rebecca's hand froze mid-handshake, and her breath caught in her throat. Time seemed to suspend itself, hanging in that conference room like smoke in still air. "Miss Thornton." The woman's voice was concerned, professional. "Are you all right?" Rebecca forced herself to move, to breathe, to pull her hand back and gesture to the chair across from her. Her mind was screaming, racing through possibilities and impossibilities, trying to reconcile what she thought she knew with what she was seeing. "I'm sorry," Rebecca managed, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "Please, sit down." "I'm fine. Just a moment of vertigo." The height, you know. It was a terrible excuse. She had worked in this building for 15 years. Hannah Weaver sat, crossing her legs and placing her own portfolio on the table with practiced ease. If she noticed anything strange about Rebecca's reaction, she was polite enough not to press the issue. But Rebecca could not stop staring at those eyes. 23 years ago, Rebecca Thornton had been Rebecca Calloway, a 30-year-old single mother living in a modest 2-bedroom house in Tigard, that a Portland suburb where nothing interesting ever happened. She had worked as a mid-level software engineer at a company that no longer existed, commuting 40 minutes each way, struggling to make ends meet while raising her daughter alone after her husband had decided fatherhood was not for him and vanished to California. Her daughter's name had been Emma Calloway. 7 years old that summer, with green eyes flecked with gold, dark blonde hair that tangled no matter how much Rebecca brushed it, and a laugh that sounded like music boxes and church bells. Emma had loved astronomy, dinosaurs, the color purple, and their elderly neighbor's golden retriever, Biscuit. She had been shy around strangers but fearless on the playground. She had been learning to ride a bike without training wheels. She had been Rebecca's entire world. And on July 14, 1998, Emma Calloway had disappeared. The memory hit Rebecca like a physical blow, even after all these years. The summer evening had been warm, the kind where the heat lingered long after sunset, making everything feel sluggish and heavy. Rebecca had been inside making dinner, chicken and rice, Emma's favorite. Emma had been in the backyard, playing on the swing set that Rebecca had spent an entire weekend installing, determined to give her daughter something nice despite their tight budget. Rebecca had looked away for maybe 15 minutes, 20 at most. When she went to call Emma in for dinner, the backyard was empty. The swing was still moving slightly, creaking in the breeze, but Emma was gone. The investigation that followed had consumed Rebecca's life. Police, FBI, volunteers searching the woods behind their development, helicopters with heat-sensing equipment, cadaver dogs, psychics, tip lines, news coverage that went national for a few weeks before fading back to local interest only. The theories multiplied like bacteria. Abduction by a stranger. Running away, though what 7-year-old runs away? Wandering into the forest and getting lost. Falling into the creek that ran behind the property and drowning, though they dredged it twice and found nothing. Foul play by someone Emma knew, someone in the neighborhood, someone at her school. They found nothing. No body. No witnesses. No evidence of struggle. Emma had simply ceased to exist, as though she had been erased from reality itself. Rebecca had spent 3 years in that house, waiting for Emma to come home, following every lead, every false sighting, and every crank call from people who claimed to have information but were just cruel or crazy or both. She had nearly lost her mind to the grief and the not knowing, the special torture of having no closure, no answers, no way to move forward or back. Eventually, in 2001, she had moved to Seattle. She had thrown herself into work with manic intensity, building her company from scratch, working 100-hour weeks, because the alternative was sitting alone with her thoughts. She had never remarried, never had more children, never stopped hoping that maybe somehow Emma would come home. But she had learned to function around the hole in her heart, the way people learn to function with chronic pain. It never went away, but you learned to move with it. And now, 23 years later, those eyes were looking at her across a conference table. Rebecca realized she had been silent for too long. Hannah Weaver was watching her with polite confusion, waiting for the interview to begin. Rebecca cleared her throat, trying to force her brain back into professional mode, but her hands were shaking. So, Rebecca began, her voice not quite steady. Hannah Weaver, you have been with Fortress Security Solutions for 7 years. That's correct, Hannah replied smoothly. She launched into a well-rehearsed summary of her experience, her accomplishments, her vision for cybersecurity in an increasingly digital world. She was articulate, knowledgeable, impressive. But Rebecca barely heard the words. She was too busy studying every detail of the woman's face, looking for other similarities, other echoes of the daughter she had lost. In the shape of the nose. That was Emma's nose, or what it might have become. The slight asymmetry of the smile, higher on the left side. The way she tilted her head when making a point, just slightly like a bird listening for worms in the ground. The hands long-fingered and expressive, gesturing while she talked. All of it familiar, all of it impossible. Emma would be 30 years old now, if she had lived. The math worked. The age was right. But Emma Calloway had vanished in Oregon, and Hannah Weaver's resume showed she had grown up in Vermont, attended high school in Burlington, had a perfectly normal, traceable life history. Rebecca forced herself to focus on the interview, to ask questions about encryption protocols and threat assessment procedures and team management philosophy. Hannah answered everything perfectly, demonstrating both technical expertise and emotional intelligence. She would be an excellent hire. Under any other circumstances, Rebecca would have offered her the job on the spot. But these were not normal circumstances. "I notice you grew up in Vermont," Rebecca said, trying to keep her tone casual. "What brought you to the West Coast?" "College, initially," Hannah replied. "I got into Stanford for computer science, fell in love with California, and then migrated north for work opportunities. Seattle felt like the right fit. Smaller than San Francisco, less pretentious, but still on the cutting edge of tech innovation. Any family back east?" Something flickered across Hannah's face, too quick to read. "No, I was raised by my aunt and uncle. They passed away a few years ago. Car accident. It's just me now." "I'm sorry to hear that," Rebecca said, and meant it. But her investigator's instincts, honed over years of searching for Emma, were prickling. "Were you close with them?" "As close as we could be," Hannah said carefully. "They took me in when I was young, gave me a stable home, put me through school. I owe them everything. But we were never, I don't know. There was always something distant about the relationship. Like they loved me but were never quite comfortable with me, if that makes sense." Rebecca's heart was pounding so hard she was certain Hannah could hear it. "What happened to your parents? Your biological parents, I mean?" Now the flicker on Hannah's face was longer, more troubled. She shifted in her chair, and for the first time since entering the room, her confidence seemed to crack slightly. "That's a complicated question," Hannah said slowly. "The truth is, I don't really know. My aunt and uncle always told me my parents died when I was very young, too young to remember. They said it was a car accident, that they were the only family I had left, that I was lucky they took me in. But when they died and I was going through their papers, trying to settle the estate, I found some things that didn't add up." "What kind of things?" Rebecca asked, trying to keep her voice level. Hannah was quiet for a moment, clearly debating whether to continue with this personal tangent during a job interview. But something seemed to compel her forward, as though she had been waiting for years for someone to ask the right questions. "My birth certificate was wrong," she said finally. "The dates didn't match. The hospital they listed as my birthplace had no record of me. When I tried to dig deeper, everything was dead ends. It was like my entire childhood before age 8 was fabricated. I was in therapy for a while trying to process it, and my therapist suggested I might have been adopted through unofficial channels, or that there might have been abuse they were protecting me from, or a dozen other explanations, but none of them felt right. It felt like something else, something worse." Rebecca's mouth had gone dry. Her pulse was roaring in her ears. Every instinct she had was screaming that this was Emma, that somehow, impossibly, her daughter was sitting across from her after 23 years. But how? And why would Hannah not know? Unless... "Have you ever tried DNA testing?" Rebecca asked. "Those ancestry websites, you know. They might help you find biological relatives, fill in some of those gaps." Hannah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I have thought about it. Honestly, I have come close to ordering one a dozen times. But I'm scared, I think. Scared of what I might find. Or worse, scared of finding nothing at all. Of confirming that I'm just alone in the world with no connection to anyone. At least now I have the possibility of family out there somewhere. The maybe. Does that sound crazy?" "No," Rebecca said quietly. "That doesn't sound crazy at all." The interview continued for another 30 minutes, but Rebecca was operating on autopilot. Her mind was racing through possibilities, plans, ways to confirm what every fiber of her being was telling her had to be true. By the time Hannah left, thanking her for the opportunity with that familiar asymmetrical smile, Rebecca was already reaching for her phone. She called Marcus back in immediately. "I need you to do something for me," Rebecca said without preamble. and I need you to not ask questions until I'm ready to explain." Marcus raised an eyebrow but nodded. Look, he had worked for Rebecca long enough to know when she was serious. "Anna Weaver, I need everything you can find on her. Not just what's on her resume. I need her childhood records, school photos, medical history if you can get it. Anything that shows where she came from and who she was before she showed up at Stanford. And I need it quietly. Don't use the company's standard background check service. Hire a private investigator, someone discreet, someone good." "Rebecca," Marcus said slowly, "what's going on?" "Not yet," she replied. "Give me what I asked for first. Then I will tell you everything." After Marcus left, Rebecca sat alone in the conference room for a long time, staring at the Seattle skyline without really seeing it. Her hands were still shaking. Her mind kept replaying that summer evening in 1998, the swing creaking in the empty yard, as the sound of her own voice calling Emma's name over and over until it went hoarse. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos until she found the album she kept but rarely looked at, the one that hurt too much to open except on the worst nights. Pictures of Emma at 6 months, 1 year, 2, 5, 7. That last photo taken just days before she vanished. Emma grinning at the camera with her 2 front teeth missing, holding a butterfly she had caught in the backyard, those distinctive green and gold eyes bright with joy. Rebecca zoomed in on those eyes, then opened her laptop and pulled up Hannah Weaver's LinkedIn profile. The professional headshot showed a polished, mature woman, but those eyes were the same. Rebecca was certain of it. She spent the rest of the day in a fog, canceling meetings, ignoring emails, and unable to focus on anything except the impossible possibility that her daughter had just walked back into her life. But if Hannah was Emma, and Rebecca was becoming more convinced by the hour that she was, then what happened? How had a 7-year-old girl from Oregon ended up in Vermont with a fake identity? Who were the aunt and uncle who had raised her? And why did Hannah not remember anything about her life before age 8? The questions multiplied, each one more disturbing than the last. But this was not a story of a child who ran away and built a new life. 7-year-olds did not do that. This was a story of abduction, of identity theft, of a child being stolen and hidden and given a new past to replace her real one. This was a crime that had never been solved, and now maybe, just maybe, Rebecca had a chance to finally get answers. But she had to be careful. If Hannah truly did not remember being Emma, then approaching this wrong could traumatize her all over again. And if the people who had taken her were still alive, still out there, then revealing what Rebecca suspected could be dangerous. Rebecca pulled up the old case files that she had never quite been able to throw away, stored in a locked filing cabinet in her home office. The lead detective, Gerald Marsh, had retired years ago, but she found his contact information in her old records. She hesitated for a long moment before dialing, unsure if she was about to open a door that could never be closed again. The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Marsh. Mangman. Marsh. Detective Marsh, this is Rebecca Calloway. Well, Rebecca Thornton now. I don't know if you remember me, but in 1998, my daughter Emma. I remember, Marsh said immediately, his voice softening. Jesus, Rebecca, I think about that case more than I should. It's the one that got away, you know. The one I could never crack. How are you holding up? I think I found her, Rebecca said. And saying the words out loud made them real in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I think Emma walked into my office this morning for a job interview. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Walk me through it, Marsh said finally. Everything. Don't leave anything out. Rebecca told him about Hannah Weaver, about those eyes, about the missing childhood and the fake documents and the aunt and uncle who had raised her in Vermont. She told him about the dates that did not add up and the identity that seemed manufactured. As she spoke, she could hear Marsh breathing heavily on the other end, the sound of someone whose past was suddenly becoming present. Vermont, Marsh muttered. I remember we got a tip in 1999, maybe 2000, from someone who thought they saw Emma at a rest stop somewhere in upstate New York. We followed up but hit a dead end. If someone was moving her across the country, they knew how to stay off the radar. Rebecca, listen to me. If this is Emma, and I'm not saying it is yet, but if it is, then we are looking at a sophisticated abduction and identity replacement that takes planning, resources, connections. Well, whoever did this was not some opportunistic predator. This was targeted. But why? Rebecca asked, the question that had been haunting her since Emma vanished. Why my daughter? We had no money, no enemies. We were nobody. No. That's what we could never figure out, Marsh admitted. Most child abductions have clear motives. Custody disputes, sexual predators, trafficking, ransom. None of those fit Emma's case. She was taken cleanly, with no demands, no sightings, no body. It was like she was erased, and if someone went to the trouble of giving her a whole new identity, raising her as their own, then the motive was something else entirely. Well, something we never considered back then. What do I do now? Rebecca asked, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of it all. First, DNA, Marsh said firmly. We need to confirm this before we do anything else. Do you still have anything with Emma's DNA on it? Hairbrush, baby teeth, anything? Rebecca's voice broke slightly. I have everything. I never threw anything away. I have her toothbrush, her hairbrush, clothes, toys. I kept it all in storage, just in case. Good. Get me samples. I will reach out to some people I still know in the bureau. If we can get a sample from Hannah Weaver somehow, we can compare. But Rebecca, you need to be patient. This could take time. And if she is Emma, we need to be strategic about how we approach this. There's a victim here who has been through hell, even if she does not remember it. We have to think about what's best for her, not just about getting closure for you. I know, Rebecca said, though every instinct in her wanted to run to Hannah immediately, to grab her and never let go. I will wait. But Gerald, if this is real, if she's really my daughter, then someone stole 23 years from both of us. Someone took her and made her forget me. I need to know who did this, and I need them to pay for it. One step at a time, Marsh said. Let's confirm first. Then we will figure out the rest. I will call you tomorrow. After hanging up, Rebecca sat in the growing darkness of her office, watching the city lights blink on as evening fell. Somewhere out there, Hannah Weaver was probably at home, unaware that her entire life story might be a lie, unaware that she might have a mother who had spent 23 years grieving her, unaware that she was the key to a mystery that had haunted an entire community for more than 2 decades. Rebecca thought about the aunt and uncle who had raised Hannah, who had died conveniently in a car accident just a few years ago, taking whatever secrets they had to their graves. She thought about the fake birth certificate and the missing records and the gaps in Hannah's memory. She thought about the little girl who had loved dinosaurs and purple and golden retrievers named Biscuit, and wondered if any part of Emma still existed inside the professional, the capable woman who had sat across from her that morning. The next few days passed in agonizing slow motion. Marcus delivered his preliminary report on Hannah Weaver. Her backstory checked out on the surface: a childhood in Burlington, Vermont, raised by Robert and Diane Weaver, no criminal records, good student, unremarkable suburban life. But when the private investigator dug deeper, cracks started appearing. The Weavers had moved to Vermont in late 1998, just months after Emma's disappearance, with a 7-year-old girl they claimed was their niece. Before that, they had lived in Michigan, had no children, and according to neighbors from that time, had never mentioned having any nieces or nephews. The school records showed Hannah enrolling in 2nd grade in Vermont in January 1999. Her academic performance was described as struggling initially but improving, with notes from a counselor about adjustment issues and possible trauma. She had been homeschooled for the first semester, the Weavers claiming she needed time to recover from the accident that killed her parents. But there was no record of any such accident. No death certificates for Hannah's supposed biological parents. No news reports. Nothing. Rebecca took the information to Marsh, along with DNA samples from Emma's old hairbrush. But Marsh used his connections to obtain a coffee cup that Hannah had discarded in a trash can outside her apartment building, feeling guilty about the invasion of privacy, but knowing it was necessary. The DNA comparison took 5 days. 5 days during which Rebecca barely slept, barely ate, existed in a state of suspended animation between hope and dread. When Marsh called with the results, his voice was heavy with emotion. "It's a match," he said simply. "Hannah Weaver is Emma Calloway. Your daughter is alive, Rebecca. She's alive." Rebecca collapsed into her chair, 23 years of grief and hope and desperate longing crashing over her like a tsunami. She sobbed into the phone, unable to speak, unable to process the magnitude of what she had just learned. And her daughter was alive. Emma was alive. And safe. But even through the tears and the overwhelming relief, a darker emotion was growing. Rage. Someone had stolen her daughter. As if someone had taken Emma and hidden her, and given her a new name and made her forget her real mother. Someone had robbed them both of 23 years they could never get back. Who were they? Rebecca asked when she could finally speak again. Then the Weavers. Who were they really? "That's what we need to find out," Marsh replied. "I have contacted the FBI. This is an active kidnapping case now, even if it's 23 years old. They are going to want to interview you, and eventually they are going to want to talk to Hannah. But Rebecca, that we have to tell her. We have to tell her the truth about who she is, and we have to be prepared for how she might react." Rebecca thought about Hannah sitting in that conference room, talking about the strange distance she had always felt from the people who raised her, the gaps in her memory, the fear of finding out the truth about her origins. She thought about the moment when she would have to look her daughter in the eyes and tell her that everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. "I will do it," Rebecca said firmly. "I will tell her. She deserves to hear it from me." But before she could arrange a meeting, before she could figure out how to say the impossible things that needed to be said, something happened that changed everything. Marcus burst into her office 3 days later, his face pale, holding his phone like it might explode. "Rebecca," he said urgently, "turn on the news. Right now." She grabbed the remote and switched on the television mounted on her wall. The local news was showing aerial footage of a house in suburban Seattle, police cars and FBI vehicles surrounding it, yellow crime scene tape everywhere. "Breaking news this evening," the anchor was saying, her voice professionally concerned. "FBI agents have raided a home in the Maple Leaf neighborhood as part of what sources describe as a major human trafficking investigation. The details are still emerging. But authorities say this may be connected to several cold cases involving missing children from the 1990s and early 2000s. We are also receiving reports that this is connected to the discovery that a woman living in Seattle may actually be Emma Calloway, a child who vanished from Oregon in 1998 in a case that captivated the nation." Rebecca's blood ran cold. The story was out. Somehow, despite all their attempts at discretion, word had leaked. And if the story was out, that meant... And her phone rang. Marsh's number. "Rebecca, listen to me carefully," he said without greeting. "Someone leaked this to the press. We don't know who yet. But if there were other people involved in Emma's abduction, people beyond the Weavers, they now know we are onto them. You need to get somewhere safe, and we need to find Hannah immediately, and if she's in danger." Rebecca was already grabbing her keys, running for the elevator. "Give me her address. I'm going to her." "Rebecca, wait for the police." "Give me the address," she repeated, her voice leaving no room for argument. Marsh gave it to her. Rebecca drove through Seattle traffic like a woman possessed, her heart hammering, her mind racing through terrible possibilities. What if the people who took Emma wanted to silence her now that the truth was coming out? What if they tried to hurt her again? What if Rebecca had just found her daughter only to lose her forever? She pulled up to Hannah's apartment building in the University District 20 minutes later. The building was a modern construction, all steel and glass, the kind of place where young professionals lived. Rebecca took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor, found apartment 312, and pounded on the door. No answer. "But Hannah," she shouted, not caring who heard. "Hannah, it's Rebecca Thornton. From the interview. I need to talk to you. It's urgent." "Please." Still nothing. Where's she? See? Rebecca tried the doorknob. Locked. She pulled out her phone to call the police, her hands shaking, when she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, and there was Hannah, coming up the stairs with a bag of groceries, earbuds in, completely unaware of the chaos erupting around her. When she saw Rebecca standing at her door, her expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Ms. Thornton?" she said, pulling out her earbuds. "Is everything okay? Did I get the job?" Rebecca looked at this woman, her daughter, standing there so alive and unharmed, and felt something break inside her. All the years of grief, all the nights of wondering, all the desperate hope and crushing despair, it all came flooding out. "Hannah," she said, her voice shaking, "we need to talk, and I need you to trust me, even though what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible." Hannah's face changed, becoming guarded. "What's going on?" "Your name isn't Hannah Weaver," Rebecca said, the words tumbling out now. "Your name is Emma Calloway. You were abducted from your backyard in Oregon when you were 7 years old. And the people who raised you were not your family. They stole you, and I." Her voice broke. "I'm your mother. Your real mother. And I have been looking for you for 23 years. Hannah stared at her, the groceries slipping from her hands and hitting the floor with a crash. Apples rolled across the hallway carpet, but neither of them moved to pick them up. "That's impossible," Hannah whispered. "It's not," Rebecca said. "I have DNA proof. I have records. I have photos of you as a child, and you have your father's nose and my grandmother's hands and those eyes. God, those eyes, I would know them anywhere." "Hannah, Then, please, I know how this sounds. I know you have no reason to believe me. But it's true. Everything you thought you knew about your childhood is a lie. And there are people, dangerous people, who might come after you now that the truth is coming out. You are not safe here." At that moment, as if the universe was determined to prove Rebecca right, both of their phones began buzzing simultaneously. News alerts. The story was everywhere now, spreading across social media, national news picking it up. Missing child found alive after 23 years. Cold case solved in shocking DNA discovery. Emma Calloway reunited with biological mother. Hannah looked down at her phone, her face draining of color as she read the headlines. She looked up at Rebecca, then back down at the phone, then up again, her expression cycling through disbelief, shock, confusion, and finally dawning horror. "Oh my God," she said softly. "Oh my God, that's me. That's my face. That little girl in the photo, that's..." She swayed slightly, and Rebecca reached out to steady her, the first time she had touched her daughter in 23 years. But Hannah did not pull away. "We need to go," Rebecca said gently but firmly. "Right now. The police are looking for you, the FBI wants to talk to you, and we don't know if there are still people out there who were involved in your abduction. Please, Emma, Hannah, whoever you are, just trust me for right now. Come with me. Let me keep you safe." Hannah looked into Rebecca's eyes, those familiar green and gold eyes meeting their mirror image, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or just a desperate need for answers in a world that had suddenly stopped making sense. "Okay," Hannah said finally. "Okay."
They ran. The safe house was an hour outside Seattle, tucked into the forested hills near North Bend, where the mountains began their climb toward the Cascade Peaks. Detective Gerald Marsh had arranged it through his FBI contacts a nondescript cabin that belonged to the Bureau's Witness Protection Program, used for situations exactly like this one. The drive had been tense and silent, Hannah staring out the window while Rebecca gripped the steering wheel. Both women processing the impossible reality that had crashed into their lives like a meteor strike. By the time they arrived, night had fallen completely. The darkness beneath the evergreens was absolute, the kind of black that only existed far from city lights. Rebecca parked behind the cabin, and they went inside to find Marsh already waiting, along with 2 FBI agents who introduced themselves as Victoria Lang and James Patterson. The cabin's interior was Spartan but comfortable, furnished with the practical minimalism of a place designed for temporary refuge rather than permanent living. Hannah stood in the middle of the small living room, looking lost and overwhelmed, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her own pieces together. Rebecca wanted desperately to go to her, to embrace her, to make up for 23 years of stolen hugs and missed goodnight kisses. But she forced herself to keep distance, to let the professionals do their job first. There would be time for reunion later. Right now, they needed answers.
Agent Lang, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and an efficient manner, gestured for Hannah to sit on the worn sofa. I know this is overwhelming, Ms. Weaver, or should I say Ms. Calloway. What would you prefer we call you? Hannah shook her head slowly, her voice hollow when she spoke. I don't know anymore. I have been Hannah Weaver my entire conscious life. But you are all telling me that's not real, that I'm someone else entirely. How do I choose which name belongs to me when I don't remember being either person? Let's start with what you do remember, Agent Patterson suggested. He was older than Lang, probably late 50s, with the weathered look of someone who had seen too much darkness in his career. His voice was kind, grandfatherly almost. Take us back to your earliest memory. What's the first thing you can recall from your childhood? Hannah closed her eyes, concentrating. Rebecca watched her daughter's face, memorizing every line and curve, still unable to fully believe this was real. I remember snow, Hannah said finally. Lots of snow. Being in a house that smelled like pine and wood smoke. Uncle Robert teaching me how to tie my shoes. Aunt Diane making hot chocolate with little marshmallows. I remember feeling confused a lot. Like I couldn't quite understand where I was or how I got there. They told me I had been in an accident, that my parents died, that I hit my head and forgot things. They said my memory would come back eventually, but it never really did. Everything before maybe age 8 is just fog. Just impressions without details. How did they treat you? Marsh asked, leaning forward in his chair. And the Weavers, were they kind, cruel, something in between? Hannah's expression was conflicted, pain and confusion warring across her features. They were, I don't know, distant but not cruel. They provided for me, made sure I had food and clothes and education. They weren't warm people, but they never hurt me. Not physically, but emotionally. There was always this wall between us, like they were obligated to take care of me but didn't particularly want to. I always thought maybe it was because I reminded them of my dead parents, their dead sibling. But now, knowing they weren't really my family at all, I wonder if they just couldn't bring themselves to love a stolen child. Rebecca flinched at those words. Stolen child. That's what Emma had been. Stolen from her yard, stolen from her life, stolen from her mother who would have died for her. Did they ever take you places that seemed strange? Lang pressed. Meetings with other people, trips that didn't make sense, times when they seemed nervous or secretive. Hannah thought for a long moment. There was one thing. When I was maybe 10 or 11, we drove to Boston. They said it was a vacation, but we didn't do any tourist things. Instead, we went to this office building downtown. Uncle Robert went inside alone while Auntie Anne and I waited in the car. He was in there for almost 2 hours. When he came out, he looked upset, angry almost. They argued in the front seat while I sat in back, trying to pretend I couldn't hear them, like court pieces. Something about payments and promises and can't back out now. I didn't understand it then. I thought maybe they were having money problems. The agents exchanged meaningful looks. Patterson made notes on a tablet. Did they have friends? Marsh asked. Other families they were close to, people who visited regularly. No, Hannah said immediately. But that's another weird thing I never really thought about until now. We were isolated. Homeschooled for the first few years, then public school but with strict rules about not having friends over, not going to other kids' houses. They said it was for my safety, and that the world was dangerous. By the time I was a teenager, I had learned to keep people at arm's length. It was just easier than explaining my strange family. Rebecca's heart was breaking as she listened to her daughter describe a childhood of loneliness and alienation so different from the warm, social little girl Emma had been. What had they done to her? How had they twisted her personality to fit their needs? Lang pulled out a folder and opened it, revealing several photographs. These are Robert and Diane Weaver, correct?
Hannah nodded, looking at the pictures of the couple who had raised her. They looked ordinary, middle-aged, and unremarkable, the kind of people you would pass on the street without a second glance. We have been digging into their backgrounds, Lang continued. Robert Weaver worked in nothing glamorous, middle management at various tech companies throughout his career. Diane was a homemaker after you came to live with them, but before that, she worked as an administrative assistant at a law firm in Detroit. On paper, they look completely normal, but when we dig deeper, inconsistencies appear. Patterson took over. The law firm where Diane worked closed in 1997, just a year before Emma's abduction. But it wasn't a normal closure. It was shut down by the Michigan State Bar after an investigation into illegal adoption practices. Specifically, they were facilitating off-the-books adoptions, connecting children with families willing to pay significant amounts of money for a baby or young child without going through proper legal channels. Rebecca felt her stomach turn. You think they bought her? Someone took my daughter and sold her to the Weavers? It's looking that way, Lang confirmed. But the law firm's records were seized and sealed as part of the criminal investigation. We are working on getting access, but that takes time and warrants. What we do know is that at least 3 lawyers from that firm were convicted of fraud and child endangerment. But the main partner, a man named Gregory Sutton, disappeared before charges could be filed. He's been on the run for over 20 years. Marsh stood and began pacing, his detective instincts clearly firing. So the theory is this: someone abducted Emma from her yard in Oregon in July 1998. They transported her across the country, probably by car, to avoid airline records. They connected with this underground adoption network, which matched her with the Weavers, a couple who wanted a child and were willing to bypass legal channels to get one. The Weavers paid for her, created false documents, moved to Vermont where nobody knew them, and raised her as their own. But who took her in the first place? Rebecca demanded, her voice rising with frustration and rage. The Weavers weren't in Oregon. They had no connection to me or Emma. Someone else grabbed her, someone local, someone who had access to my backyard, someone who knew when I would be distracted. Who was it? Silence filled the cabin. That was the question they still couldn't answer, the missing piece that would make everything else make sense. Hannah spoke up, her voice small and shaken. There's something else. Something I haven't thought about in years, but now it's coming back. Dreams, or maybe memories, I could never tell which. A man's voice, gentle but firm, telling me I was going on an adventure. The smell of chloroform, that sweet chemical smell. Being in the back of a van. Groggy and confused. A woman's face, not Aunt Diane, someone else younger with dark hair. She was crying. She kept saying she was sorry over and over. I used to wake up from those dreams as a kid, and Aunt Diane would tell me they were just nightmares. My brain trying to process the trauma of losing my parents. But they weren't nightmares, were they? They were memories. Rebecca's hands were clenched into fists, her fingernails digging into her palms. Someone had drugged her 7-year-old daughter, traumatized her, stolen her entire identity and sense of self. And whoever had done it had gotten away with it for more than 2 decades. Lang was typing rapidly on her laptop. The woman with dark hair who was crying. Can you describe her more? Any details at all? Hannah closed her eyes, clearly struggling to pull up an image from the depths of memory that had been buried for so long. Young, maybe early 20s, thin, long dark hair, almost black. She had an accent, I think. Not heavy, but noticeable. Maybe Eastern European. And she wore a necklace, a silver cross. I remember watching it swing back and forth while she held me. Patterson and Lang exchanged another look, this one electric with significance. We need to make a call, Lang said abruptly, standing up. She and Patterson stepped outside, leaving Marsh, Rebecca, and Hannah in the cabin's living room. Through the window, Rebecca could see the agents talking urgently into their phones, their faces illuminated by the glow of their devices. Marsh turned to Rebecca, his expression grave. There's more to this case than we realized. The FBI wouldn't be this interested in a 23-year-old cold case unless it connected to something bigger. I think Emma's abduction wasn't an isolated incident. I think she was one of many. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a shroud. Hannah looked like she might be sick, her face pale and drawn. Rebecca moved to sit beside her on the sofa, no longer able to maintain the distance. She reached out slowly, giving Hannah the chance to pull away, and when she didn't, Rebecca took her hand. It was warm and real and alive, and for a moment, Rebecca let herself feel the simple gratitude that her daughter was breathing, was found. "I'm scared," Hannah whispered. "My entire life is a lie. Everyone who could tell me the truth is dead. And now you are saying there are more people out there, people who did this to other children? What if they come after me to keep me quiet? What if they try to take me again?" "I won't let that happen," Rebecca said fiercely. "I lost you once. I will burn the world down before I let anyone take you from me again." The agents came back inside, their expressions unreadable but intense. Lang resumed her seat, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "We just spoke with our colleagues in organized crime," she said. "In the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a trafficking network operating across the United States. It was highly sophisticated, using legal professionals and corrupt officials to move children from one state to another and place them with families who paid premium prices. The network was broken up in 2004, but many of the key players were never caught. The description you just gave, Hannah, of the woman with dark hair and an Eastern European accent matches a woman we have been looking for in connection with that network. Her name, or at least the alias she used, was Katrina Volkov." Hannah's hand tightened around Rebecca's. "Who was she?" "A recruiter, we think," Patterson said. "Someone who helped identify targets and facilitate the actual abductions. She was young, personable, good at gaining trust. There are at least 6 cases where witnesses reported seeing a woman matching her description shortly before a child disappeared. But she vanished after the network started falling apart. We have had no sightings, no leads, nothing for 20 years. Until now." "You think she's still alive?" Marsh asked. "We think she might be," Lang replied. "And if she is, and if she learns that one of her victims has surfaced with intact memories, she might panic. People who run for 20 years tend to be very invested in staying hidden." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. "So Hannah is in danger?" "Potentially," Lang admitted, "which is why she needs to stay here under protection until we can determine who else might still be out there and what threat they pose. This safe house is off the books. Nobody outside our immediate team knows you are here. You are safe for now." But Rebecca could see the fear in Hannah's eyes, the same fear she had seen in 7-year-old Emma's eyes when she was afraid of thunderstorms or the dark. Some things, it seemed, transcended memory and time. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. The cabin had no television and limited internet, cut off from the media frenzy that was apparently consuming the outside world. Marsh brought updates when he visited. The story had gone national and then international. True crime podcasts were already dedicating episodes to it. Amateur internet detectives were combing through old records and posting their theories online. Some of the attention was helpful, generating new tips and potential leads. Most of it was just noise. During those days, Rebecca and Hannah began the slow, painful, beautiful process of getting to know each other. They looked through old photos that Rebecca had brought, pictures of Emma as a baby, a toddler, a little girl. Hannah stared at these images of herself with a mixture of recognition and alienation, like looking at a stranger who happened to have her face. "I was happy," Hannah said softly, holding a photo of 4-year-old Emma laughing in an inflatable pool, her small arms raised in pure joy. "I can see it in my face. I was loved." "You were so loved," Rebecca confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "You were everything to me. You were my whole world." They talked about the years they had lost, Rebecca describing the life Emma would have had if she had never been taken. Birthday parties and school plays and teaching her to drive and sending her off to college. Hannah talked about the life she had actually lived, the loneliness and confusion, and always feeling like she didn't quite fit anywhere. 2 lives, one lived and one stolen, both equally real and unreal. On the 3rd night, unable to sleep, they sat together on the cabin's small porch, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. The stars were spectacular this far from the city, the Milky Way a river of light across the black sky. "Do you want me to call you Emma?" Hannah asked suddenly. "Is that what you need from me?" Rebecca considered the question carefully. "I want you to be whoever you are. If that's Hannah, then I will learn to love Hannah the way I loved Emma. If you want to reclaim the name Emma, I will support that too. You got to choose so little about your own life for so long. At least let this choice be yours." Hannah was quiet for a long time, looking up at the stars. "I keep thinking about her, the woman with the dark hair, Katrina, or whoever she really was. She was crying when she held me. She said she was sorry. Oh, that doesn't sound like a monster. That sounds like someone who regretted what she was doing. Regret doesn't undo harm, Rebecca said firmly. I don't care if she cried. She still stole you. She still participated in the worst thing that ever happened to both of us. I know, Hannah said, but I keep wondering what her story was. What makes someone do something like that? Was she forced? Was she being threatened? Or did she just need money badly enough to trade someone else's suffering for her own survival? Before Rebecca could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Marsh. Her heart rate spiked when she read it. We need to go inside, Rebecca said urgently. Now. They hurried into the cabin and Rebecca called Marsh immediately. He answered on the first ring. They found her, he said without preamble. Katrina Volkov. Real name, Katrina Volkov, just like the alias. She's been living in Portland under a different identity for the last 18 years. Working as a hospice nurse, of all things. Never married, no children of her own. The Portland field office is picking her up right now. Portland, the same city where Emma had been taken. The coincidence made Rebecca's skin crawl. Do they think she was the one who took Emma from my yard? They don't know yet, Marsh said, but they are about to find out. They want Hannah to come to Portland tomorrow to potentially identify her. Would she be willing to do that? Rebecca looked at Hannah, who had clearly heard enough of the conversation to understand what was being asked. Her daughter's face was pale but determined. I will do it, Hannah said. I need to see her. I need to know. The drive to Portland the next morning took 4 hours, Marsh at the wheel with Rebecca in the passenger seat and Hannah in back, flanked by agents Lang and Patterson. They arrived at the FBI field office downtown just before noon, entering through an underground garage to avoid the media trucks that had apparently been camped outside since news of Volkov's arrest had leaked. Inside, the building was all harsh fluorescent lights and institutional beige walls. They were led to a small observation room where they could look through one-way glass into an interrogation room. And there she was. Katrina Volkov looked nothing like the dark-haired young woman from Hannah's fractured memories. She was in her late 40s now, her hair cut short and streaked with gray, her face lined with the weight of years and secrets. She sat at a metal table, her hands folded in front of her, looking resigned and oddly peaceful, like someone who had been expecting this moment for a very long time. Hannah pressed close to the glass, studying the woman who had helped destroy her life. It's her, she whispered. I recognize her eyes. Even after all these years, I remember those eyes. Agent Lang touched Hannah's shoulder gently. We are going to question her now. You can watch from here, but if at any point it becomes too much, you can leave. Nobody will judge you for that. Hannah shook her head. I'm staying. I need to hear what she has to say. Lang and Patterson entered the interrogation room. Rebecca stayed beside Hannah, both of them watching through the glass as the agent sat down across from Volkov. MS. Volkov, Lang began, her voice calm and professional. You have been read your rights. You understand that you are being charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and trafficking of minors. Do you understand these charges? Volkov nodded slowly. When she spoke, her voice carried the same accent Hannah had described, softened by years, but still present. I understand. I have been waiting for this day for 20 years. In some ways, it is a relief. Then let's start with Emma Calloway, Patterson said, sliding a photo across the table. It was 7-year-old Emma, the last school picture taken before she vanished. Did you abduct this child from her home in Tigard, Oregon, on July 14th, 1998? Volkov looked at the photo for a long time, tears forming in her eyes. Yes. God forgive me, yes, I took her. Rebecca felt the room spin. After 23 years of questions, here finally was an answer. But it brought no satisfaction, no closure, only a fresh wave of rage and grief. Walk us through it, Lang said. Everything. It's from the beginning. Volkov took a shaky breath. I was recruited in 1996 by a man I knew only as Mr. Sutton. I had come to America 2 years before that from Ukraine, trying to escape a bad situation back home. I had no papers, no legal status, no money. Sutton found me working under the table at a restaurant in Detroit. He said he could help me, give me money and eventually papers if I helped him with his business. I was desperate. I said yes without really understanding what I was agreeing to. What was the business? Patterson pressed. Matching children with families, Volkov said, her voice hollow. Families who wanted children but could not adopt through legal means, um, either because they did not qualify or because they did not want government records or because they wanted a child of a specific age or appearance. Sutton had connections everywhere. Lawyers, social workers, even some police. He would identify potential children, usually from single-parent homes or poor families, situations where the child might not be immediately missed or where investigations would be slow. Then people like me would take the children and move them to temporary locations while Sutton arranged placements. The families paid enormous amounts of money. Everyone got a cut. How many children? Lang asked quietly. Volkov closed her eyes. I personally took 12. There were others in the organization who took more. It went on for years. 12 children stolen from their lives, their identities erased, their families destroyed. Rebecca wanted to smash through the glass and hurt this woman the way she had hurt so many people. Only Hannah's presence beside her, solid and real, kept her anchored. Why Emma Calloway specifically? Patterson asked. What made her a target? Sutton chose her, Volkov said. I never knew his selection criteria exactly, but I think he looked for children who were physically distinctive in positive ways. Unusual coloring, attractive features, bright children, things that would appeal to buyers. He had been watching the family for weeks. He knew the mother's routine, knew there was no father in the picture, knew the backyard was secluded. He told me exactly when and how to take her. So it was you alone? You physically abducted her? Volkov shook her head. No, Sutton was there too. He drugged her first, used chloroform on a cloth, moved quickly before she could scream. I was just there to take her once she was unconscious, to hold her in the van while he drove. My job was to keep the children calm when they woke up, to tell them stories and make them feel safe until they could be delivered to their new families. I was supposed to be the nice one, the comforting figure in their trauma. It makes me sick now thinking about it. Where did you take Emma? Lang asked. Safe house in Idaho first. Kept her there for 3 days while Sutton finalized the arrangements with the buyers. Then we drove to Michigan. Handed her over to the Weavers at a rest stop outside Grand Rapids. They paid $50,000 cash for her. Sutton gave me 10%. $5,000 to ruin a child's life. That is what I sold my soul for. Rebecca was crying silently, her whole body shaking. Hannah put an arm around her, a reversal of roles that would have been touching under any other circumstances. The other children, Patterson said, we need names, dates, locations, everything you remember. I will tell you everything, Volkov said. I have kept records, hidden for years, insurance in case Sutton ever turned on me. Names, dates, the families who bought them, everything. I will give it all to you. I am ready to face punishment for what I have done. I have lived with this guilt every day for 20 years, working in hospice, caring for the dying. It was my attempt at penance. But you cannot care for enough dying people to make up for destroying living children. Lang leaned forward. Where is Gregory Sutton now? Volkov's expression became guarded. I do not know. After the network started collapsing in 2004, he disappeared. I never heard from him again. I changed my name, moved to Portland to be close to one of the children I had taken, so I could watch from a distance and make sure she was all right. That was Emma. I have been in the same city as her for 18 years, watching her grow up, making sure her new family was treating her well enough. It was the only thing I could do to ease my conscience. You have been watching me? Hannah said suddenly, her voice loud enough to carry through the glass and into the interrogation room. Volkov's head snapped up, looking at the mirrored window. She couldn't see Hannah, but she knew she was there. Emma, she said, her voice breaking. I am so sorry. I know sorry means nothing. Fixes nothing. But I need you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Of all the children, you haunted me the most. Maybe because you were so young, or because you cried for your mama for days. Or because I could see the light dying in your eyes as you slowly forgot who you were. I am sorry. I am so, so sorry. Hannah's hand found Rebecca's, gripping it tightly. I remember you crying. The day you took me. You held me in the van and you cried. I cried for all of them, Volkov said to the mirror, tears streaming down her face now. But I took them anyway. I am a monster. I made myself a monster for money and safety, and I have paid for it with every moment of the last 20 years, knowing what I had done and being unable to undo it. The interrogation continued for another hour, Volkov providing details about the network's operations, names of other participants, locations of other abducted children. Some had been taken even younger than Emma, babies stolen from hospitals or snatched from shopping centers. Some had been older preteens who had been specifically requested by buyers. It was a comprehensive, nightmarish catalog of human trafficking and child exploitation. By the time the agents finished and Volkov was led away to a holding cell, Rebecca felt hollowed out, emptied of everything except exhaustion and grief. Hannah looked no better, her face drawn and pale. They were led to a conference room where Marsh was waiting with coffee and sandwiches that neither of them could bring themselves to eat. "She's cooperating fully," Marsh said. "The information she's providing is going to crack open at least a dozen cold cases. Families who have been searching for answers for decades are finally going to get them because of what happened with you two, because Emma was found. All of those other families are going to get their children back or at least know what happened to them. That matters. What you have been through, as horrible as it is, it's going to help a lot of people." "What about Sutton?" Rebecca asked. "The man who actually organized all of this. Is he still out there?" "We are looking," Marsh said. "With Volkov's information, we have leads we never had before. If he's alive, we will find him." Hannah spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "She said she stayed in Portland to watch me. For 18 years, she's been in the same city. Has she, I don't know, kept records of that? Photos, notes, anything that could show what my life was like after she took me." Marsh hesitated. "Her apartment is being searched right now. If there's anything like that, we will find it. But Hannah, you need to prepare yourself for what that might mean. Someone who is watching you from a distance, documenting your life, that's not a comfortable thing to know about." "My entire life is uncomfortable now," Hannah said with a bitter laugh. "At least if she has photos or records, I might be able to fill in some of the gaps in my memory. The Weavers didn't keep many pictures of me, and the ones they did keep ended when I turned 18. It's like my childhood just doesn't exist except in fragments. If she has documentation, I want to see it." 2 hours later, agents brought boxes from Volkov's apartment. Inside were dozens of photo albums meticulously organized by year. Hannah as a child in Vermont. Photos taken from a distance through telephoto lenses. Hannah as a teenager walking to school at track meets, sitting in coffee shops. Hannah as a young adult at Stanford, graduating, starting her first job. 20 years of surveillance, obsessive and disturbing, but also strangely protective. Volkov had been watching to make sure Hannah was safe, that the Weavers weren't abusing her, that the child she had helped steal was at least surviving the theft. Hannah flipped through the albums with trembling hands, seeing her own life documented by the woman who had destroyed it. Rebecca looked over her shoulder, seeing the daughter she had missed growing up. Every photo was a dagger to her heart. First day of high school, prom, college move-in day, job interviews, moments that should have been Rebecca's to witness, stolen and captured instead by someone who had no right to them. "This is so messed up," Hannah whispered. "She stole my life and then spent years watching what became of it." "What kind of person does that?" "A guilty one," Rebecca said. "She knew what she had done was evil, so she tried to make sure at least you survived it. It doesn't make it right. Nothing makes it right. But maybe she was trying to be less of a monster than she was." That night, back at the safe house, Rebecca and Hannah sat together, going through both sets of photos. The real memories from Emma's first 7 years and the stolen documentation of Hannah's next 20. 2 lives, 1 person, separated by a crime that had shattered everything. "I want to be both," Hannah said eventually. "Not just Emma or just Hannah, but somehow both. Emma is who I was supposed to be. Hannah is who I became. I can't erase either one of them. They are both real. They are both me." "And then that's who you will be," Rebecca said. "Emma Hannah, or Hannah Emma. Whatever feels right. You get to decide." 3 days later, news broke that Gregory Sutton had been found. Not alive, unfortunately. His body had been discovered in a remote cabin in Montana, dead for at least 10 years based on the decomposition and evidence at the scene. He had apparently lived as a hermit after fleeing justice, dying alone of what the coroner determined was a heart attack. His death meant no trial, no public reckoning, no chance for his victims to confront him. But it also meant he couldn't hurt anyone else ever again. With Sutton dead and Volkov in custody, the immediate threat to Hannah's safety diminished. She was able to leave the safe house and return to Seattle, though, with security precautions in place. The media frenzy gradually died down as news stories took over the news cycle, though the true crime documentaries and podcasts would probably continue for years. Rebecca offered Hannah the director of cybersecurity position she had originally interviewed for. Hannah accepted. They agreed it was strange to have a mother-daughter relationship that included being CEO and employee, but they were committed to making it work, to building something new from the wreckage of what had been stolen. The healing process was slow and painful. Hannah started therapy to process the trauma and the identity confusion. Rebecca joined her for family sessions, learning how to be a mother to an adult daughter she had last known as a 7-year-old child. They fought sometimes, navigating the complicated dynamics of their relationship. They cried often, grieving the years they had lost. But they also laughed, finding moments of joy in getting to know each other. 6 months after Hannah had walked into that interview, they were in Rebecca's house going through more old boxes when Hannah found a stuffed dinosaur, worn and faded, but clearly well-loved. "I remember this," Hannah said softly, holding the toy carefully like it might dissolve. "Not clearly, but there's something. It's a feeling. Safety, maybe. Or love. I remember this being mine." "That was Mr. Stomps," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "You named him that because you liked to stomp around the house pretending to be a T-Rex. He was your favorite thing in the world. You took him everywhere. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of him after you were gone." Hannah hugged the dinosaur to her chest, and for just a moment, Rebecca could see 7-year-old Emma in her 30-year-old daughter's face. The little girl was still in there, buried under layers of trauma and false identity and stolen years, but still there. "Still alive. I want to go back," Hannah said suddenly, "to the house in Tegard where you lived when I was taken. I need to see it. Maybe it will help with the memories." The house had long since been sold, but Rebecca contacted the current owners and explained the situation. They agreed to let them visit. So on a Saturday in early spring, Rebecca and Hannah drove to suburban Portland and stood in the backyard where everything had changed 24 years earlier. The swing set was gone, replaced by a trampoline and a play structure. The trees were taller, the fence had been repainted, but the essential geography was the same. Hannah walked slowly around the yard, touching trees, looking at the sky, trying to pull something concrete from the fog of her earliest memories. "I remember being happy here," she said finally. "That's what I remember most. Not the taking, not the fear, but before that. I remember being loved, I remember feeling safe. And then that safety was ripped away, and I spent the rest of my childhood feeling like I was waiting for something. Though I didn't know what, I think I was waiting to feel that safe again." "Do you?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Feel safe now?" Hannah considered the question seriously. "Getting there. It's hard to feel completely safe when you know how easily everything can be taken away. But having you, knowing who I really am, that helps. I'm not floating anymore. I'm anchored to something real." As they stood together in that backyard, mother and daughter reunited after nearly a quarter century apart, a car pulled up in front of the house. A woman got out, probably in her late 50s, with dark hair streaked with silver. She approached cautiously, her expression hesitant but determined. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm sorry to intrude. But I live 2 streets over and I heard through the neighborhood that you were visiting today. My name is Patricia Daniels. I lived here in this neighborhood back in 1998. I remember when Emma disappeared, it haunted this whole community for years." Rebecca tensed, protective instincts flaring, but Patricia held up her hands in a peaceful gesture. "I don't want to bother you. I wanted to say how glad I am that she was found, that you found each other. This neighborhood has carried the weight of that mystery for so long. Knowing that at least Emma survived, that there's some kind of resolution. It means something to all of us who were here and who never stopped wondering." Other neighbors began appearing, drawn by some invisible community signal. They gathered at a respectful distance, older couples who had been young parents in 1998, now grandparents. People who had searched the woods, hung flyers, held vigils. A community that had been wounded by Emma's disappearance and now finally could see that wound beginning to heal. Hannah looked overwhelmed by the